Good morning. Good morning. We are in my kitchen. Yay! If you're following me on Twitter, you've seen a picture of how I set up the computer to capture this beautiful shot of my kitchen. I want to go look at that because, you know, like everything I do, it is super structurally sound and safe and a really great idea. A really great idea. Yeah. So today we are going to make some pizza. The toppings that I'm going to choose for my pizza are a little bit like off the beaten path as far as your traditional pizza goes. But if you can get a decent pizza crust, you can put whatever you want on top of it. So I wasn't too worried about showing you like a great selection of toppings. You probably have your favorite. I imagine that everybody kind of knows what they like on a pizza. So I'm going to do something a little bit different, which should be kind of fun. It's definitely one of my favorite ways to eat pizza. So what you'll need to get started: some flour, some olive oil, which I forgot to put in the tweet when I tweeted the hey, bring this stuff today so you can follow along. I forgot olive oil. I hope you have some oil. If you have like regular vegetable oil instead of olive oil, you'll probably be okay. And then a little bit of yeast, some salt, and some water. That's the dough. Super simple stuff. You like the wires strung over the stovetop paper, Bob? Yeah, that's the camera that's pointed at the pan here for later when we're doing some pan stuff. Has to be wired into, yeah. It's a super high quality paper, Bob. Just regular flour, like all-purpose, boring, the regular flour, Bob and Tom. And we're going to use a little bit of active dry yeast. If you have like a yeast packet, that's fine too. This is how I get my yeast because I like to make lots of stuff, so I get like a big thing of yeast. All right, so we're going to start with 4 cups of flour. If you are in the civilized part of the world where you don't use cups, use a liter of flour. Do you measure flour in liters? That seems weird. Like, it seems like you should measure it in kilograms or something. But I don't know the conversion for that. So use a liter of flour. This recipe was given to me. I've eaten a lot of pizza this month as I was practicing this recipe for the show today. This recipe was given to me by a viewer when I was like, hey, I want to make pizza, but I don't have a good dough recipe. This came from Refium, if you are curious the source. And he should get some credit for the recipe. So 4 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of olive oil in there. I'm going to measure my 2 tablespoons like this. And that's going to be fine. And we're going to put in a cup of warm water. I'm going to use the same measuring cup I used for the flour. Now, when I say warm water, if you haven't used yeast a lot and you're scared of yeast, lukewarm is fine. Like, keep it cool so it doesn't kill the yeast. If you make it too hot, it'll kill your yeast won't work. If you make it too cold, everything will be fine. It will just take a little longer. The reason you want warm water is it helps the yeast wake up and get going and start doing the thing yeast does, which is be alive, eat sugar, make alcohol and carbon dioxide. When you're making bread, it doesn't make a lot of alcohol and it all cooks off. And the carbon dioxide is really what you're looking for because it puts those bubbles in your bread and fluffs it up so it's not like a super dense cracker. But yeah, I mean, bread and beer are basically the same recipe, just different proportions. So the way I'm going to test the temperature of my water is I'm going to put my finger in there. And when the water feels about the same temperature as my finger, then it's about 98 degrees in the weird Fahrenheit scale. And that's close enough. Yeast can take temperatures up to like 110, 120 and be okay. But if you want to be really safe, like just body temperature water is fine, and that's easy to measure. Like If it doesn't feel warm and it doesn't feel cold, it's the same temperature as your hand. So we're going to take about a cup of water. Set that in there. And we're going to take about a tablespoon of yeast. Again, like, this recipe is pretty forgiving. You don't need to measure super carefully. If you have like packets of yeast, 1 packet will work. So we're going to stick that in there. And then we're going to let that, you can see it's kind of clumpy. I don't know if you can see that it's kind of clumpy. You know, there's like a big lump of yeast there. We just want to work that in so it's distributed through the water. It's going to help all the yeast wake up and be ready to do its job. No, bottom tone, I don't add any sugar to this. There's enough sugar in the flour for the yeast to eat. So all we're going to do is get it warm and wet here. And then we'll mix it in with the flour, and that'll give it enough food to eat. Use all the yeast you want a pizza explosion. I don't think it works that way. I mean, 4 cups of flour only expands so far. Well, oven's hot. Been preheating my oven since before the stream started, going to 450 degrees, which, again, I do not know the conversion for people in the civilized parts of the world, but there are basically like 2 temperatures you cook stuff at in Fahrenheit, 350 and 450. So whatever like the higher temperature is you cook stuff at, make your oven that hot. Pizza likes to cook really, really hot. All right. Once that yeast is pretty like evenly incorporated, there's no big like chunky lumps of yeast left in the water, we can mix that in with the flour and oil. About a cup of water. Last time I did this, I had to add a little bit extra water to get it well incorporated with the flour. This is, you know, not like super strict measurements, but more like you want to get the right texture here, more than you want to like really follow the recipe. So, I'm going to mix that in. Should probably put a little salt in there. Recipes always call for like this tiny amount of salt, and I am not expert enough to know what it does, but like, recipes always call for like a teaspoon of salt in 4 cups of flour. Are you going to taste that? Probably not. I don't know why they call for it, so I keep putting it in. This spoon is a little too weak to handle this job, so I'm going to go in there with my hands. The first bit, when there's a lot of water, like loose water that's not incorporated, if you stick your hands right in, they'll get really messy. If you work it in just a little bit and then go in with your hands, they'll only get a little messy. This is a little dry. This dough should be sticky when you're done. So where mine has like extra excess flour on the top of it and it's really dry, I'm going to add some more water. This is going to affect, if you don't get enough water, it's going to affect how dense the dough is when it's cooked, and sort of the chewiness versus crispness factor. So you kind of want to get, consistency is what's important when you're making dough. Okay. So this is just like a little bit tacky on the outside of the dough ball now. I'm going to put a little bit of flour down on my counter so I don't make a huge mess of sticky dough goo. Now this recipe doesn't need a ton of kneading. You don't really want to like work the dough for a long time, but you do want to make sure that it's well blended with the water. So I'm just making sure that there are no like super dry lumps in there. Giving it a little once over until it's a pretty much the same consistency throughout. Make sure I just don't have any big pockets of flour by mushing it for a second. Now this dough is pretty sticky. It's gonna stick to whatever container you put it in. If you've got it at the right consistency, it's going to make a mess out of your hands. So what we're going to do to combat that is I'm just going to take a little bit more oil and stick it in the bottom of the bowl that I'm going to let the dough rise in. And I'm just going to coat this dough ball in oil so it doesn't stick to the bowl. Just going to get a nice light coating on there. Okay. So I'm planning on using this dough later today, so I'm going to leave this bowl with some saran wrap over it right on the counter. That should rise enough for me to cook later this afternoon. It's going to take 3 or 4 hours. If you need longer than that, if you're making this like after dinner and you want to eat it tomorrow, you can take this slimy, oily dough ball and just stick it in a Ziploc bag and put it in your fridge. That'll slow down the yeast process. It'll be risen enough to use in about 24 hours. If you do it in the fridge, should I be using a beard net? Phil, if I was working in a professional kitchen, I would have to use a beard net. But since I'm cooking for myself to eat for lunch, it's going to be okay. Sometimes I forget where all my stuff is. This is what I was looking for. This is just so the dough doesn't dry out while it sits on the counter. And it works super well if your hands are kind of wet. Works super well. Saran wrap failure. So this stuff sticks with static electricity. Static electricity and water are not friends. Alright, so we're going to let that rise for 3 or 4 hours. And then that'll be ready to be made into some pizza later today. if I eat any of my beard hair by mistake, it will just grow more beard epicness. That's right, make yourself. That is exactly right. You want to fuel your beard by eating lots of beard. Gross. On the topic of hair and hairnets, while we have a second waiting for the dough to rise, yes, we're just going to talk for 3 hours. I think it's really weird that hair is not gross while it's attached, and then suddenly gross when one comes loose. Like it's suddenly the most vile and disgusting thing. While it's attached to your head, totally fine. We want to play with it and touch it and stroke it, and that's good. And then as soon as one pops loose, gross, get that out of my food, that's disgusting. I mean, it's a little bit like awkward to pull it out of your mouth, but really, like, disgusting? Really? Really? I've never understood that, which is probably why I'm weird. Alright, so I'm going to prepare now the toppings that I'm going to use for my pizza. There's a couple of pieces that we're going to do on the stove. So I'm going to heat this pan up to just above medium. We want a nice low heat because what I'm going to do is caramelize some onions there for my pizza. I'm going to set this right on top of the flour so it looks like I cleaned the counter. If you're not actually clean, make sure it looks clean. Alright. A lot of you probably know this, but the proper way to hold a knife, if you hold it by the handle, you don't have a lot of control over the the roll of the knife. If you pinch the blade and use 3 fingers on the handle, you get a lot more control over where your knife is going. If you've never learned that, there's a quick knife tip. When I'm cutting up an onion, I find it easier to skin after I've cut a piece off. You can just make a little slit like that, and then unwrap the skin from that part. Instead of trying to skin the whole thing. Alright, so when you're cutting vegetables, you want to start with the back of the knife and slide toward the front, and that'll get you a nice smooth motion to cut these up. I want pretty thick pieces of onion to caramelize here. I'm just going to take those and quarter them, and those are going to be my big caramelized onion pieces. Alright, so I probably didn't turn the pan on soon enough. It's probably going to take too long to warm up here for a minute. We want just a little bit of oil down. We're not trying to deep fry our onions, but we also don't want them to stick. So I want just a little bit of oil down in the pan. And we're going to toss these onions in there. Now low heat because I want the sugars in the onion to get warm and hot, and then the sugars are going to caramelize. When you make caramel, what you do is you take a big bag of sugar and you just cook it until it is caramel. So we're doing the same thing to the onions. That's why it's called caramelizing. We're going to let the sugars inside the onion have that same chemical reaction where they're going to melt and then heat up, and they're going to brown and caramelize. We want that to happen before the outside of the onion burns. So a really nice low heat first. And we're going to let those simmer for quite a long time. Another kitchen tip, clean as you go. If you don't clean as you go, you'll be really sad every time you get done cooking and your kitchen's a disaster. And if you do clean like we have a minute, those are going to be fine for quite a while that pan heats up a bit. We might as well use that time to tidy up a little, and then when we're done, we have great food and a clean kitchen, and life is really good. Oh, there goes the camera. I don't know if you can hear that. The microphone's pretty far away from the stove, but we're starting to get a good sizzle sound on these onions. I'm just going to make sure they keep moving around a little. Have you ever tried substitute leeks for onions? It sounds pretty good, behind tone. But we're making sort of a non-traditional thing here that you'll see once we get going. Shouldn't have set this in the flour. Now I have to clean both sides of it. Okay. What am I gonna grab this flour with? Am I using my nice mic? No. This setup, I'm using the built-in mic on my Mac. Because right after this, I want the minimum transition time while I run down and switch to Kerbal Space Program. And I didn't want to have to like unhook anything from my studio and set that all back up in between. So like when I shut off here, I can run downstairs and turn right on downstairs. Okay. I use my kitchen towel to cover my other dough. That's going to be ready and risen for us to use. And so I was taking a second to think about, where should I get a kitchen towel? You take it off the dough, that's fine. Pizza and KSP today. That's right. That is right. JB Lux, we've been on for about 20 minutes. We've made some dough, and we're starting to caramelize some onions for the pizza here. What's on my shirt? My favorite pumpkin pie recipe is on my shirt. Although this is my best cooking themed shirt, so I wore it for today. Do I ever add things to my dough? I haven't played around with this pizza enough, Bontom, to have, like, I haven't made it enough times to start adding things to the dough, but I imagine that you could make some really nice dough with different herbs and stuff in there. Depending on what toppings you wanted to do, you could match some herbs or cheese to that. That would be really good. Okay, so I'm waiting for the onions to start to be a little bit translucent and a little bit soft. Once they get to that point, they're sort of warm all the way through, and we can kick the heat up just a little bit. I'm going to want something better to stir them with. Does the dough also work for cheese or cinnamon sticks? That's the other thing I haven't tried, Bontom. When I made pizza with this dough, it gets a nice soft crust around the outside, and underneath it's pretty thin and pretty crisp. I have taken some of the extra dough and wrapped it around some, like I chopped up some peaches and put some cinnamon and sugar in there and just wrapped some dough around there and baked that. And worked pretty well for that. It's a pretty basic dough. You can use it for a lot of things. Pretty versatile, I would guess. We're starting to get a little bit of color on the smaller pieces there. So here's the secret to caramelized onions: sugar. You don't want, now, if you put a ton of sugar in there, you're going to make like candied onions, and they're all going to stick together in one big ugly onion clump. But if you sprinkle just a little bit of sugar like you might do salt, that helps get that caramelization working and that flavor all the way throughout. We're going to do just a little bit of sugar, not too much. What do I think about 3D food printing printers? I don't know a lot about them to think about those very deeply. J Deluxe. Alright, so at this point I'm ready to turn the heat up a little bit and let these onions start to cook through. Once the heat is up, we want to keep them moving a little bit more to make sure one spot on them doesn't burn. Starting to get a little color on there. The timing on caramelized onions took me a long time to get. I was always burning them and they were never good. You want to take your time and cook them nice and slowly. If I had to eat a Toyota, which model would I choose? I'm not really usually a big fan of eating vehicles, but thanks for your question. Alright, so I'm going to start working on another couple of toppings for this pizza. We're going to do a bit of apple. So I'm just going to get these slices ready. These I do want pretty thin because we're not going to pre-cook them. They're going to need to cook through in the oven with the rest of the pizza. Starting to get the color we want. so what we're doing here with the apples is we're going to make kind of a sweet and savory pizza. Ooh, that piece is rotten. And all of the toppings are going to be these caramelized onions, which are both sweet and savory. Apples, which are sweet. They're going to balance really nicely with some gorgonzola cheese, which is savory. And we're going to top that off with a little balsamic vinegar glaze drizzle when it comes out of the oven. Man, look at those onions. They're all different sizes, and the little ones are done, and the big ones aren't. And I have made a disaster. It's probably fine. Llama must have good knives. They're not really nice, but I take good care of them. And I honed this right before the show today, so it's slicing pretty well. Morning, Ice Dragon. Yeah, we're going to put apples on the pizza. Alright, so I have some dough that I prepared yesterday, so it would be risen by now. This recipe, it makes enough dough that I can get 2 12 to 14 inch pizzas out of it. Since I'm the only one at home right now, I'm going to have to eat this whole thing by myself, I'm only making one 12 inch pizza with this dough. So I'm going to use about half of it. Get some flour down. Alright, so I'm just going to cut this in half with a knife. And keep half for later. This half, the more circular it starts, the more circular it will stay when you're done. Now, you can throw this dough if you're like super skilled at making things spin in the air, and you can use you know, the angular momentum to pull the edges of the dough out, and you'll get a nice ring around the outside and a beautiful. I'm not skilled. I can't do that, so I'm going to use a rolling pin. Huzzah! Huzzah! And I'm just going to rolling pin this dough out. For a pizza, you really, really don't want to roll past the edge of your dough because you want to get that nice ring around the outside of the crust to hold everything in. So as you roll, leave a big lump on the edges. That's going to be good. We want that. I have in my oven, heating up as we speak, a nice round pizza stone, which is going to help the underside of the dough cook. If you don't have a pizza stone, you can make this on like a cookie sheet. Just make your dough a rectangle instead of a circle, or make a circle smaller than your cookie sheet, and you'll be fine. But that should be about the size of my stone. So we're going to get that on there. this was split in half, bottom tone, and that's probably 14 to 16 inches. I think my pizza stone's only 14 though, so I hope it fits. I'm gonna go ahead and not burn a giant hole in my counter. It seems like a good plan. That almost fits. Get unrolled dough. Just unroll a little bit and you'll fit and it'll be great. Good work. Good work. For the pizza I'm making, I'm just gonna put a little more of this olive oil down on the top of the dough because I'm not using a traditional like marinara sauce for this. So I'm just gonna oil it just a little bit. Going to put on these caramelized onions I made earlier. I'm going to add some apples. If you want it to be pretty, you can line all your apples up in a circle and make it pretty. There is a lot of value in having your food be beautiful. It makes it taste better. If it's really attractive, you can taste the care and love that went into making it. A lot of eating is psychological. So we're going to put some delicious apples on there, and then some gorgonzola cheese. And my fingers are too oily from the onions to pull on the edge of the foil here. So I'm going to poke a hole in it. And I'm just going to sprinkle that pretty generously. We're not going for like a full surface covered in melted cheese here with gorgonzola. The flavor's too strong for that. But we want a pretty generous bit of cheese on there. Like you're balancing the sweet apples with the salty cheese is the idea. And that goes back in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. You want to keep an eye on it. Because I have that hot stone underneath it, I can see the dough is already starting to cook on the counter. And so I'm going to set my timer for about 8 minutes so I don't overdo it. We'll look at it in 8 minutes. And during those 8 minutes, I'm going to prepare my glaze. And I'm going to prepare it on a burner way too big for my tiny pan because that's the one the camera can see. So I'm going to take, what is this? 4 ounces of balsamic vinegar. And this wasn't designed to be used in such large quantities, so it's going to take a little work to get it out of the bottle. To that, we're going to add some sugar. This is not a thing I've ever measured before as I've been making it, so I don't know how to tell you how much. If I had to estimate, I'd say 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup of sugar we're going to put in there to sweeten that up. I can kind of just do it to taste until it tastes good. No sauce on this one, Chuck Norris. I mean, you can make a very traditional pizza with the same dough, but I'm showing you some sort of non-traditional pizza that I like. Am I making simple syrup? No. No, Herpy. Simple syrup is water and sugar. Balsamic vinegar is very not water. Very not water. Oh, I spilled sugar on my burner, and now I've made some caramel right on my burner. Great. Alright, so we're going to let that come up to a boil, and we want it, I want that to thicken up. I don't want it to be the consistency of the vinegar. It's too thin. But you have to be pretty careful, because it'll get to a point, there's not a lot of space between super liquidy and a solid chunk. And we want to find that tiny space in between those two. So hopefully that's good. Accidentally setting off the fire alarm with Llama Chomp. That's what he's on, sir. My brother and I talked about one time we decided that we should make a cake. And we, in traditional Llama Chomp style, made tons of mistakes and tons of oh, we bought the wrong ingredient and we don't have time to go back to the store. And so we dug around the house looking for things to fix all of our disasters. And we substituted baking cocoa and chocolate syrup for baking chocolate bars. We did all kinds of insane substitutions. We had the wrong pan. We were supposed to make 2 layers, and we just had one pan. We made 1 layer and cut it in half with a knife. And we thought, you know what? We should make a cooking show called Disaster Kitchen, where we show you how to adapt and fix things when you screw them up horribly. So that was fun. We never did end up making that show. Maybe I should get him down here. It's Eversor. You guys know him if you watch the channel a lot. I should get him down here, and we should do a special episode of Disaster Kitchen. Except, the problem is, if you plan the disasters and the solutions ahead of time, it's not super real. So we probably just turn the camera on and be like, all right, chat, what should we make? We're going to use the ingredients that are here, and we're going to fake it. And maybe that would be a fun show. Olé! More fire! Hi. I was about to say hello to you, but then I read your Twitch name, and that's not something I want to say out loud on the video. But hello! Hello. So this is, you'll see me, I'm picking this up and checking the consistency very, very often. And the reason is, in my experience with making this glaze, there's a very, very, very small margin between way too thin and way too thick. And so I want to hit that spot. I also want to make sure I have enough sugar. So I'm just going to grab a spoon and give it a little Flavor Flav. No, it's pretty good. What toppings? I'm making a pretty non-traditional pizza. We're doing apples, caramelized onions, gorgonzola cheese, and then this balsamic glaze that I'm cooking up right now. And that's all already in the oven. We're getting close. You can tell it's getting close. The volume's down by about half of what I put in there originally. In your mouth, please. Satori, well, you were mentioning that you needed to come out and visit. Come out and visit. I will put this pizza in your mouth. Hey, Magna. It is delicious. Oh, and it might be done. Cheese is melted. Crust is starting to brown around the edges. It can probably go for another 2 minutes. And that'll be perfect. That should give me just enough time to finish this glaze, I hope. Gently now, you. Gently now. You're going to be flying over my head on Monday? All right, tell me the timing and I will throw a slice of pizza as high as I can. Oh, or you could ditch your work trip and parachute in. I've played a lot of Kerbal Space Program the last couple weeks, Satori. Maybe I could design a rocket that will just match your plane's altitude and you can grab it out the window. And if you've watched me play KSP, you know I'm more likely to shoot your plane down than anything else if I try that. That microwave sounded like a truck backing up. There's a pretty loud beep on that. So I'm trying to boil off exactly the right amount of balsamic vinegar here to make this have some thickness and some body, but not be a chunk of weird balsamic candy. Did I just get on an FBI watch list? Flash? Is that what just happened? How long is your layover, Satori? I'm only like half an hour from the airport. Alright. Pizza is pizza. Whoa. And my glasses are fogged up. This is just about ready. It's really close. I've turned the stove off and the oven off. And just the residual heat on the burner is going to get that the rest of the way it needs to go on that glaze. Hi, Mafintis. Only an hour layover? Yeah, it's really not enough time. Stop that. I want this to cool off a little bit before I add it to the pizza. So I'm going to make it an ice bath. Not in there. That still has dough in it. I'm going to make it this fashionable pink ball. So hopefully if I take some heat out of this, it'll thicken up just a little bit. Well, actually, but those are apples on the pizza. This is apples, caramelized onions, and gorgonzola cheese. And then I'm going to put this balsamic glaze I've been working on over the top. It's pretty good. It could be a little thicker, but we're out of time. I don't want to play with some simulated rockets. I want to have some time for that too. So just going to drizzle, water. Just going to drizzle this balsamic glaze over the top. There's your pizza. Can I get this in closer to the camera for you before I slice it up and eat it in front of you like a rude person? Whoa! Not without throwing it on the ground. Here we go. There it is. So I'm going to make myself a plate of lunch here. And head down to get ready for the rest of the stream today. The rack underneath the pizza stone is making it too wobbly to cut on with this knife. So this crust comes out really crisp and thin. See that on there? And you can see it's pretty stable. I can hold it right from the end, and it's pretty strong holding the pizza out there. So this recipe makes a nice crispy thin crust, which is perfect for this like gorgonzola apple deliciousness that I've got here. You want to have still really hot. So caramelized onions, balsamic glaze, apples, gorgonzola cheese. Got a nice balance of sweet and savory. I wish I could give you some, because it's really good. All right, time is it? Oh, this only took an hour. That's really good. That means we have like 2 hours left for Kerbal Space Program. So I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to run downstairs, turn on Kerbal Space Program. You're going to continue to watch me eat this pizza for breakfast lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's a little brunch pizza. And I'll see you guys. Like this, I have to shut down the stream to switch computers, so it'll be down for a couple minutes, and I'll see you in a couple minutes. We'll play some Kerbal Space Program. You bet, Magna. Thanks for stopping by. It's always good to see you. It has apples. It counts as breakfast. Perfect. Perfect. What am I forgetting? I need to cover this dough before it dies. What's the plan for the other dough? Dinner pizza? Yeah. The plan for the rest of the dough, Bottom Tome, is I'm going to feed my family pizza as well. I might try and play with it a little bit. One of my neighbor's peach trees is on right now, and so we have like tons and tons of peaches because they have far too many for them to eat. So I might try to make some like desserty stuff with the rest of the dough. We have quite a bit of dough now. So we might do like some peach cinnamon rolls or something with some of the dough. It's probably a thing. How long can you store dough for? You don't want to leave it. You probably want to eat it within 24 hours of making it. Just because the yeast is alive. I don't really know what happens with that if you leave the dough for a really long time. All right, off. Disastrous mess. Not incredibly messy over here. Pizza for me. I need a drink to go with my pizza. And then I'll see you guys downstairs for Kerbal Space Program. Alright. Okay, I'm shutting down. I'll see you guys in a couple of minutes downstairs.